Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Ms. Chartier.
How are you?
Hello. Hello.
Good.
Hi, Miss Kennedy.
Hi. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Oh,
Yep.
okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Mr. Manning, how are you? Good to see you again.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. We're still here. I'm just waiting until my clock says
No,
5.
that's okay. It kept saying I was muted, so I was trying to figure out what was going on.
Okay. I have 5 o'clock and it looks like we have a quorum. So I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. All right. I guess we'll just jump right in. I'll ask if there is a motion for approval of the minutes.
I move we
Move
take
to
the
approve
roll.
the minutes.
Oh, yes, we should probably take a roll. Thank you, Mr. Manning. Ms. Only, will you help us out by calling the members of the committee
Yes, ma'am. Horatio,
here?
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning, and Newton.
Manning is here.
Yes, sir. I got you.
Okay. Hopefully Ms. Newton will be joining us shortly. Okay.
I'm here.
Just trying to connect now.
Okay, great. I'll just pause.
Can you not
and-
hear me?
Oh. We didn't originally hear you.
Okay. I'm here.
Great. So it's 100% attendance today. I will ask if there is a motion to approve the minutes from the July 28th, 2020 meeting.
So move.
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Any discussion about the minutes from that meeting? Hearing none, I'll ask Ms. Only to call the roll to approve the minutes.
Horatio,
Yes?
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 3 is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Madam Chair, Bill Malinowski, can I have clarification?
Sure.
I'm just looking at the inside page of this committee and it shows the members as you as the chair, Kennedy, Manning, and McBride. Is Miss Newton a member and has she just been left off of that?
Was
Mr.
that,
Mal- Mr. Malinowski, she is a member.
Okay,
Hello.
she's just left off. Thank you.
But I was added to a different committee's list, so I don't feel completely neglected.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of okay. I told him to keep quiet.
okay.
Thank
Thank you for that. Actually, my paper had like a blank spot, so it didn't print fully. So thank you. Okay, so now the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda for today?
Move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none.
Ms. Horatio,
Yes, Ms. Myers?
this is Ashia. I apologize. We actually need to have action item 4A to be deferred to the next committee meeting as the briefing document included was the incorrect briefing document.
Thank you so much. So with that item, are there any other additions, deletions, changes?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. With the proposed, so Ms. Only, will you call or is there any discussion on the proposed changed agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll ask Ms. Only to call the roll to vote on the adoption of the agenda.
Horatio,
Yes?
Kennedy,
Yes.
Manning,
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Only. Item 5, we have 2 items for discussion. The first one is 5A. I move to evaluate affordable housing options to include the option of establishing an affordable housing trust fund for Richland County as a benefit to the public. Housing is considered to be affordable when 30% or less of one's income is spent on housing and utilities. In Richland County, nearly half of renters pay more than a third of their income on rent and utilities. We have a briefing document. It is pages 20 through 23 in our packet. Do we have an update from staff or? on this item?
Madam Chair,
The city council addressed that.
Madam Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Powell.
The county's comprehensive planner, Mr. Brian Crooks, is leading the internal work group around that item, and he is on the call.
Great. Can we
Good
hear?
evening. Good evening, members of the committee, Ms. Terratio. As Ms. Powell stated, I'm one of the members as part of this internal work group leading this effort. And so since the previous DNS committee meeting, our task has essentially been to develop a purpose and a possible structure for an affordable housing advisory committee. And so that is what the committee has been working on over the last month and a half or so. And our recommendations are put forth in the briefing document with a purpose, kind of an identified structure, and then some various parameters that we think could help continue that initiative forward.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? I will just say that I appreciate the work that's been done on this effort, and I see that there's a lot of similarities in the makeup of this committee with the other affordable housing task force that I'm sitting on currently. So hopefully we can be very efficient in our work together, learning from each other, and using each other's time to the best of our abilities. So thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Terratio?
Yes, Ms. Newton.
Thank you. Thanks to the staff for putting together this comprehensive document, and I certainly think it makes sense where our efforts are aligned to have multi-jurisdictional collaboration. I do have one general question looking at the priority steps that you have in the document, and thank you for doing that. I think that it makes a lot of sense to start with the committee to give us some of this additional information about initiatives and developing goals and objectives. My question is, looking at the following steps after that, do you look at the steps that you've proposed where step 1 is completed and then and only then does step 2 begin, and then and only then does step 3 begin? Or does exploration on some of these items occur concurrently in the way that you view things? Again, I completely acknowledge why you would want to start with a group and we would want to have specific goals before we delved into those items. But once that's done, is it concurrent or subsequent?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Newton, are you referring to the priority action steps from, I guess, the briefing document from last meeting?
I'm looking in my packet, and this is not the amended packet, so I'm not sure if there is a difference. I'm looking at the packet that I got on Friday, and no, there's not a difference.
There is a difference, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm not sure which item you have. I'm looking at page 18, and there's a heading that says priority steps. So that's what I'm referring to. And,
okay, yes, ma'am.
And so maybe that is from the previous brief.
So in regards to those, I guess the way that we as the work group were looking at it was that first step of the advisory counselor committee, however that was to be set up, kind of their, I guess, part of their purpose or duties or what have you would be to vet some of those additional actions just to make sure that it goes through a more full vetting process and is aligned with whatever goals or objectives the county was to have overall. So not necessarily being a 1, 2, 3, but something being looked at in a whole and vetted through that first step.
Sure, and that approach makes a lot of sense to me. And then just one more question, looking at the committee, there are some additional perspectives that could be helpful to that committee. as you look at the formation, is that something where you envision that staff would make recommendations to council and then council would come back and say, this list looks great and we also would like to add Jane Doe? Or how do you look at the initial formation of that committee?
So I think in terms of the way that the internal work group has been looking at this, we've been trying to look at it more so in a general type of membership. So in terms of what we were proposing, so similar to a structure of how the Blue Ribbon Committee is kind of set up, where it's that hybrid type of format, where you have council persons, you have various staff members, but then you also have appointed citizenry and outside entities being represented on that. And so not necessarily trying to identify a specific number or a specific person or group. So I think in terms of having those appointed citizens, we would be looking at individuals who have interest or experience with affordable housing, whether that's someone living in it, someone that works in the field, or something along those lines.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council members or committee members or other council members? Great. So this item is for discussion. I don't think there's any action that we need to take on it today. I do thank staff for their work on this and look forward to what is brought to us in the future. Moving on, we'll move to item 5B. I move to direct the county attorney to work with the county administrator to research and draft an absentee landlord ordinance. The ordinance should provide potential remedies for individuals who violate county ordinances and provide via supplemental documentation a comprehensive review of the legal impacts potentially associated with the adoption of such an ordinance. So do we have an update from staff on this item?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Powell.
Similar to the previous item, we've had an internal work group vetting this, and what we've tried to do is to quantify and qualify the impacts of enforcement of this item. And we have Mike Zapp, who's leading that work group, and he is on the call to speak to this.
Ms. Teresa?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Who's speaking? Is it Mr. Zapp?
Yeah, this is Mike Zapp. I'm the deputy building official. There's more to that last name, but it's easier if we just leave it as Zapp. So appreciate the time given to go over this document with you and the other distinguished committee members and along with our administrative staff. We've put a work group together and it includes what we consider the internal stakeholders. I know Mr. Malinowski mentioned a while back stakeholders had an opportunity to be a part of this. And so that was one of our main focuses right up front, to get the internal stakeholders input. So the work group got together and who we consider the internal working groups of it is of course, the building inspections division, zoning, business license, the assessor's office, animal control, waste management, the code enforcement, the sheriff's department, and the special services. And what I'd like to do, if it's in favor of the committee, is just kind of go through this document without trying to read it through the whole thing, and just highlight and show you kind of the roadmap of how we got to where we are today and the recommendations that we made throughout the document. With that being said, I'd like to state up front, if you looked at page 47, not the start and the back, but of the document of your packet, it shows a timeline. And that's the important thing because the overall basic recommendation of the work group is, as we went through this and tried to develop the document, is that it's going to be imperative that a timeline is kept and allowed so we can thoroughly refine the ordinance to the committee's liking, along with refining the measures of enforcement to bring validity to the overall ordinance. And as we go through, I'll share a couple of things as we talked to other jurisdictions and as we read their ordinance, some common factors related to enforcement in there. So if we start on the beginning page, and please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have a question that you'd like to be answered. But if we started the page, I believe it's 27 of your packet, page 1 with the background of it. I don't know if we remember the first time we talked a little bit about this in the first committee meeting, was one of the biggest barriers that we have in this establishing this ordinance is the overall identifying of the rental properties.
Zap,
Sir, ma'am.
can I interrupt for just a moment, Madam Chair? May I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Powell.
I will let Zap get back to the background of this item if it pleases the committee, but I want to just pause for a moment and make sure we've stated clearly up front what the recommendation of staff is, which is to take the 18 months you see spelled out on that chart that Zap referenced to further refine the ordinance itself and to engage in continued conversations with council about what resources, whether that be staff, funding, technology, what have you, are necessary for the implementation of such an ordinance. So we're hoping that you get all of the information on the front end to help you make an informed decision about how the county should move forward with enacting such an ordinance. So I wanted to make sure the council or the committee, excuse me, fully understood what our recommendation is at the current time, and to pause there for a moment if there's any discussion that needs to happen about that recommendation specifically.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee or council members?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Newton.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Powell. So just again, first repeating, so the idea is that the ordinance would continue to be developed over this 18 months. So the working groups would continue to be in effect, and then you would come back to us with an ordinance that took into account all of the things that you found during your exploration. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. If it's pleasing to the committee, what we're offering is an iterative process. So instead of bringing you a briefing document that asks for the committee to take a specific action, we would like to continue to update this issues briefing with our research so that we can continue conversation about what might be the best path forward for the county and to refine the ordinance based on that conversation that continues with the committee.
Thank you. And then looking at your stakeholders so far, and appropriately so, this has been an internal conversation with our internal stakeholders. Looking at your timeline, there's also a period where you have public awareness and input briefings. And so does that, the public consists of many constituencies. Would you also be reaching out specifically to, for example, landlords and property owners, et cetera, as stakeholders of this to get their input as well? And would that all be in the public awareness and input briefing as you currently envision the process?
Yes, ma'am, we will. And I would say that certainly we've allotted a time for that conversation with the community at large, but I don't think that it starts and stops there. I think that we've just sort of ballparked it to give us some time to refine our intention internally so that we're clear when we move it to the community. But certainly public engagement should continue throughout the duration of this 18-month timeline.
Sure. Well, thank you for answering my question. And then I guess while I have the floor, I'll just say this was a very extensive briefing document. So thank you for all of the effort that staff put into this. I can certainly say that this briefing document made me aware of really the breadth and the magnitude of what we're talking about looking at this across the whole of Richland County. So thank you for that. And thank you for the overall recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. And I will add, it was nice to read a briefing document that is this thorough without being incredibly long. So double appreciation there. Okay, any other questions or comments from council? Great. So we're just receiving this information. and we'll continue to work along the path on it. I do have one question just in terms of the time frame. I know reading through the document that we looked at a lot of other governmental bodies and how they have done similar ordinances. Do you have a feel of that? Did they take us a similar amount of time to really get things right or get theirs in place?
I will defer to Zap on that. I'll just echo the sentiments that I think the work group did a great job putting this information together. And as the person who headed this up, I think that he could speak to the nuance of what they found with other jurisdictions.
Madam Chair, this is Mike Zapp. To answer your questions, in talking with the other jurisdiction and our closest neighbor being the City of Columbia, I would tell you the staff echoed to me that they feel they didn't take a long enough period. They to their recollection, they did it in about a 6-month period, and they feel like they're backtracking a little bit on that. So with that, the work group just said, realistically, how can we reach out and include everybody and just give a solid product so when it leaves the committee and goes for the council that it's just researched and put together as best it can.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Any further comment, discussion, questions?
Ms.
All right.
Tracer, this is Elizabeth from the legal department.
Oh, hi. Yes.
I noticed in the working group, legal didn't appear to be involved in that, and I don't know if they were invited, but I know that Larry and Lauren from our office had been the ones working on this, and if they were not invited, you should probably shoot them. Powell probably shoot them email invite. I know this is a long process where legal action wouldn't be involved in every step, but if you're talking about creating a comprehensive ordinance, you probably want them to be involved at least partially along the way to make sure we're not gonna, 6 months down the road, figure out that we're doing something we can't. So just FYI.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Powell.
may I respond?
Yes, please.
Elizabeth, thank you for that. We have included legal in this, and we actually did get some feedback from Lauren. It just came on Monday, so it's not in this document, but we'll be sure to include that in the updated version of the issues briefing.
Thanks, Ashley.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I believe that wraps up the discussion on the item 5B, the discussion item. And I think the only thing left on our agenda for today is item 6.
Wait, Madam Chair,
Yes.
Chair.
Mhm.
Pardon me. I was under the impression that Mr. Zapp was giving an overview of what he'd found, and then we had paused after Ms. Powell gave her summary of recommendations so that council members could ask questions. But maybe Mr. Zapp was finished, but that was not my impression.
Listen, I apologize. I'm trying to get us adjourned too quickly. Mr. Zapp, please do continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Newton, for that. I guess where we're at, because the direction it traveled, I would just say that you have the document with you, and as you alluded to, you want to continue to go through it, and we'll field any questions or recommendations you may have at this time. I don't feel, unless the committee feels otherwise, I don't really feel it's necessary for me to run through a entire overview of the document, seeing how the conversation has already gone.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Newton.
if no other committee member has questions, it might not surprise you that I have a couple.
I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, Ms. Newton.
So again, thank you. A few questions. First is, My understanding, and Mr. Zapp, you might not be able to address this. This might be a question for legal. My understanding is that when the original motion was made and legal came back to us, what happened was legal essentially took the City of Columbia's ordinance and then changed names in certain places and made it Richland County. And this briefing document identifies some of the questions that poses and some of the things that would potentially need to change. I guess my question is, as you look at the information that you have, are there any things maybe not included in the briefing document that we might want to look at or change approach for to make sure that this is fully contextualized for Richland County? If you look at the number of properties alone, we're looking at 3 times the number of properties that the City of Columbia is looking at. And so that breadth is different. We're looking at cases where we may have, different ordinances or different code enforcement things that are in place in Richland County that may be different from the city. So I guess my question is, sometimes when we as council members give direction, I want to make sure that, as part of this process, we get the best ordinance and not just the best ordinance that's modeled after the City of Columbia. So I guess I'm asking if what you see as the approach to further contextualize this for Richland County, or if you feel like everything is already included in what you've outlined here.
Ms. Newton, if I may, Mike Zapp, can I answer that?
Please.
That's a great question. With the direction of Ms. Ashley Powell, she gave us specific instructions to make sure that we're just not copywriting somebody else's ordinance. And in that, in the document you have some of those verbiage suggestions and changes to make it, detailed to Richland County as far as the best practices that we could develop for the county, because overall, the ordinance across the board for all the other jurisdictions, they're all over the place. If you kind of look in the document, they're just all over the place. But with that, there's bits and pieces. And what we've tried to do, and as you get a chance to further look at the document, you'll see some of the actual ordinance sections that we suggested verbiage change, and legal has looked at that and is still reviewing it. And that's part of that ongoing thing, as Ms. Powell referenced to, is built into that timeline to get that whole process set for Richland County.
Sure. And I guess part of the reason that I ask is some of it is a question of fundamental direction, because it's one thing if I say, hey, let's go on a vacation and let's pick the best spot. And it's another thing if I set the car going west and say, we're headed towards California, pick the best spot for a vacation. I mean, that initial framing sets the course that you're on and might preclude other options, but that's fine. My other question, and I think we discussed this a little before, but I would appreciate clarification, is originally in my motion, the original intent was, hey, we have property owners who have property where their tenants may not be following Richland County codes. They may not be cutting their grass. They may, not be doing their responsibilities that they're supposed to do just for the general upkeep and beautification of the neighborhood. Can we have an ordinance so that in addition to whatever citations we give to the renters, that the landlords also bear responsibility? So that was the genesis of the motion. And then this document, as I understand it, is a vastly broader inspection and permitting regime. And I guess I was wondering if you could explain, for my benefit, why the more detailed or robust home inspection is part of this ordinance versus something that might just be a simpler, you didn't cut your lawn, you're not putting your garbage out, you're parking cars in your lawn and you're not supposed to.
Again, Ms. Newton, Mike Zapp, if I may. The work group, when we approached that, the work group took that in consideration, and that's why if you look at the internal stakeholders that are assigned in your document that we gave you, the focus was that, and the sheriff's department was a key player too in this. With this process, it allows everybody to look at that property up front. and how many violations it has on the property, whether they're to the tenant or whether they're to the homeowner themselves who are actually renting the property. And this allows us, the system that we recommended allows us to track all those violations. And then in turn, when it comes to the actual permitting, the permitting part of it now becomes strictly between us and the owners. The tenant no longer has play in that portion, for lack of better words, because it's the obligation of the owner. So at that time, the owner is held solely accountable for activity on that property, whether they can renew their permit or even get a permit based on all that historical data that we have on that property, based on all those internal key players. Does that answer your question?
Maybe partially. Perhaps it would be helpful for me to just start from a different perspective. So let's say hypothetically the ordinance as presented in this briefing document with your modifications existed, and you have landowner X who is applying to us to have a permit for a rental property. If that were the case, what are all of the things that you would inspect up front for a property owner to receive that permit?
Ms. Newton, if you look at I believe it's page 28 of your document, which shows you the stakeholders, and also if you look at page, I believe it's the one that shows the permitting outlines. I think that's page 27. So either one of those pages shows the stakeholders. And in that one chart on page 28, it shows you what they're looking at when they do that initial review up front. So that's where we can, like you say, hold the owner accountable for the permit. So let's just say we look at it and we look across there, and Waste Management says, you know, there's several violations because you've had washing machines and old cars in your lot, and you haven't cleaned them up. It doesn't matter if they say, well, the tenant left them there. It's now because they want to renew that permit or initially get that rental permit, it becomes their liability, according to our permitting process, to take care of those issues. Now, I would ask legal to weigh in on the legality of that.
So I guess if I could ask a more specific question, and I don't know that my page numbers correspond with your page numbers, and even if they do, I'm quite frankly having a very difficult time reading what the page numbers are in this briefing document. But so for example, looking at the residential rental unit inspection, there's something called structure. And then you have a series of things that are being evaluated there: doors and windows, stairs, rails, and porches, electrical service, electrical hazards. My question, again, just so that I can understand, is looking kind of at the original intent, which would encompass more of some of this property area, what is the reason, the benefit, or the best practice for including also some of these really more structural, mechanical items that really, you know, I don't know if neighbors are disturbed if you don't have direct access to an outside window, for example. Does that question make sense that I'm asking?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. You're kind of looking at two different things. That inspection form that you're looking at, that would be the property maintenance portion of the permitting. So they go out there and look at those items to make sure it's what as code refers to it as habitable space. You have to have so many egress windows or door. So that's what property maintenance is. The other internal areas, the things that you're talking about, those are reviewed right up front. Again, it's on mine is page 27 of the 75 documents. And that shows you that, let's just say, animal care is looking at these items that have been in the past history on that property. If they need to send somebody out there, they will. If all the violations have been abated, then they'll stamp their approval to let the permit move forward. And each of those areas have that same opportunity up front to identify those issues on the property.
Mr. Ratio?
Okay.
Yes. Is that Ms. McLean?
Yes, yes. I wanted to respond to Ms. Newton a little bit that had to do with legal, I believe. So Ms. Newton, when this first came to legal, Larry, as far as I can recall, had said he was told basically turn the city of Columbia's ordinance into something for Richland County, and that used that as a starting point. But listening to you, it sounds like what you're looking for is not exactly what you've been given. And if this was your original motion, we can act to structure this ordinance around those things that you're talking about. We rank vegetation, cars parking on the street, in the yard, things like that. So don't feel like just because that's the path this is taken that we cannot go backwards. We can go backwards and make this be more like what you wanted and then go from there. So this is all driven by you and you as the original motion maker if you made it, and council in general. So please let us know if it's taken on too much. It is now a pretty dramatic ordinance that's going to do lots of things and require time and money and people. Maybe we could dial it back and it might be simpler and actually accomplish what you want. But please, let us know what you'd like in that front and that you thought it might be in the beginning.
And if I may, and Ms. McLean, your audio was having some issues, but I think I got the gist. Certainly, my intent was something that was not as sweeping as this, but I also am not a professional inspector or professional planning staff. And so I'm certainly open to things being improved by people who do this work every day. And so the intent of my question was to try to understand why these things were added together. I don't naturally see them as part of the same thing. I certainly think that there's value in inspection, but that's not the original intent of my motion. So I was trying to understand why these things are married. And I don't know that I yet have an answer to that. It could be that they're married because it's the best practice and that's why you do it. It could be that they're married because the city of Columbia married them and this ordinance was copied after them. And I'm just trying to understand. This is certainly a sweeping difference from what I originally intended. And again, I'm open to feedback and doing the best thing for Richland County residents. Just want to understand why.
Madam Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Powell.
Ms. Newton, to respond to your question, it is exactly what you said. This was essentially a copy and paste from the city of Columbia. So what you have here is what they married in their document with slight changes modified for Richland County. And then you have some recommendations from staff about further changes to make it more context specific. I would just echo exactly what Elizabeth said to say, if this is too sweeping and too broad, certainly we can always back off of some of the things that are here. But as the ordinance is currently written, staff has just quantified and qualified what it would take to enforce such an ordinance. We're happy to amend as the committee sees fit.
Thank you, that's helpful. And that was kind of part of the original question that I was trying to ask before about how much of this was being guided by a different municipality. And maybe I asked the question poorly. So as the maker of the motion, to be specific, my intention was specifically to respond to the concerns that I'm getting from communities across my district, where you have homeowners who live in neighborhoods where they take care of their homes, they care about their neighborhoods, they care about their appearance, and then they have, XYZ renter down the street who is in flagrant violation of Richland County ordinances. And when they receive penalties, when they receive notifications, they do not respond because they don't feel like they have to because it's not their property. And so the intent of my motion was, how can we also make these landlords responsible for that? Because they do have a stake in the game, so that we can basically have people following Richland County ordinances, because what we all want are good looking communities. We want to make sure that we are protecting the biggest investments that many of us are making in our lives. And so that was the original intent. A lot of this, quite frankly, I didn't intend any of this property inspection component. And so that again is the crux of my question. So if that element is only here because it exists in the city of Columbia, then I would love it if we could direct staff to actually address more of the concerns that the motion was intended to address, and not add on these layers, which also seems to be adding a great deal of complexity and expense. And if for some reason Richland County desires to regulate rental properties to this degree, perhaps that process could be handled separately as it is more intensive. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. And I'll just recognize myself and add that I believe there were some other governmental bodies that had created ordinances that didn't so much have the inspection component to it, but rather kind of went by violations and then, went from there. So maybe that's an option. We can go more down that path if that seems to be the will of the committee.
If, Madam Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Newton.
And this will be my last time. Thank you. If staff doesn't have anything else to add and there's no other direction from other members of the committee, I would like to see language and a proposal that more addresses the concerns that I just expressed, without the additional items that came from the other model ordinance that you use. That would be my direction. And I would be happy either in this committee or in a different format to provide any additional clarification that would be helpful.
Ms. Teresa?
Yes, Ms. McLean.
Ms. Newton, we can get that together for you before the next committee meeting, if that's okay with you. And probably actually, if it's okay with you, send you a draft just to you to see if it more complies with what your thoughts are, and then present it to the committee next month. That sound okay with you?
I'm completely comfortable with that, and just would like that offer to be extended to any other committee members or council members who also have those same concerns that I do.
Absolutely. Just let me know. We'll get it to anybody ahead of time, just so you can get your 2 cents in.
Thank you. And I'll just share my own personal, thoughts about this ordinance. Looking at the issues that my district holds are not necessarily the same as the rest of the council districts. But one of the things that we look at particularly are just nuisance kind of properties, and kind of nuisance, activities on those properties. And so what I would be interested in is making sure that we could draft an ordinance and policies that could be, the word I would use is kind of nimble enough to address, just some of these. One of the things we're dealing with is just the large parties in residential neighborhoods with kind of transient or temporary residents there who are renting from, let's just say, a former a former student owns the home, has moved away to begin their adult life, and now rents a property to some friends. So we want to be able to hold these folks accountable, both probably at the level of the people. Sorry, I just got the alert for ANF, if you heard that. Both in terms of the folks participating in those activities, and also the property owners to have kind of a remedy for these for these activities. So that's just one of the concerns that I'm bringing to the table here, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the ordinance can maybe address some of those concerns. All right. Thank you. And so I feel like we're kind of wrapping up. I don't want to short change. Mr. Zapp, do you feel like we have gotten to the end of what you would like to brief us on?
Mr. Ratio,
Yes, Mr. Cowan, or Chief Cowan, sorry.
hey, as one of the committee members, I think, you had a large group of individuals from across the county that partnered on this. And the points that you just made were some that the Sheriff's Department had made because of the issues that we've got. I think everybody that's on the committee has probably got multiple ancillary things that kind of attracted themselves to what Ms. Newton's original motion was. And I respect that she wants to get something through that addresses that issue. But I think staff as a whole has done a really good job of kind of pulling together issues that are going on across the county that really need to be addressed because they're all connected to what, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Newton, but what she originally had proposed. So for example, what you mentioned from a Sheriff's Department standpoint, that is a huge problem and a huge concern for us. And we have no mechanism to deal with that. Some of the issues that Ms. Newton mentioned, there's no mechanism in place to deal with some of those things. So I would just ask, if at all, just respectfully, that we consider some of those ancillary issues that the committee members all brought to the table and realize that maybe this is a fix for all the issues that staff as a whole is having. And anyway, that's just kind of food for thought.
Thank you, Chief Cowan.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Newton.
if I could just acknowledge that quickly, to be 100% clear, my intent in no way is to eliminate needed items that we would want to have in this ordinance to make it effective. However, I do want to eliminate any bloat. We have enough going on in Richland County that we don't have to go making problems that don't exist. We can just focus on fixing the things that are actually before us. So I take no objection to whatever those ancillary issues are. I just want to make sure that we are right sizing the solution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Certainly don't want to bite off more than we can chew here, I guess. Okay, any further discussion from staff or other council? Okay, hearing none, it is 5:48. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. I was going to say we might not have quorum, but we do have Ms. Kennedy still. I'll second the motion to adjourn. And I'll have Ms. Only call the roll.
Ms. Horatio,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning, Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I'll see you all in the next one.